All right, welcome everyone. See you all rolling in here. 8 o'clock on the East Coast, 5 o'clock Pacific Coast time. We'll give it about 30 seconds, won't wait too long, and then we will get started. As you are joining, you'll see a quick poll that'll pop up. It should take you about 5 seconds. Just get our presenter an idea and myself who's joining us tonight. Combo of parents, students, both and grade level could help lead Meredith's discussion a bit. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Awesome. Goes. All right. So welcome everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us tonight as Collegewise talks through understanding STEM's many branches in college and selecting your college major. And a very special thank you to Hansel Lin, founder of the Coder School, for sharing this webinar with his the Coder School community. So this is technically a private event for all of you. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Hansel, for sharing it. Should be a really good, informative evening. Before we get into it, and I pass it off to our presenter for tonight, I want to first tell you quickly about Collegewise. And if some of you have been on these webinars before, then you know, but I'm sure we have a few new people who are wondering who exactly Collegewise is. So you see a bunch of numbers over on your screen right now, but real quickly, we started in 1999. We started with the premise that we could take the stress out of the college application process and bring sanity back into it by pairing students with expert counselors to guide them throughout their college admissions and application journey. 25 years later, in 2024, we now have over 75 counselors, 60 tutors working with thousands of students across the globe. We pride ourselves in having the most extensive expertise around universities, applications, and all the ways that high schoolers can spend their time in high school that let them pursue interests, strengths, and help them build the profile connect to the right university for them. Over these last 25 years, we've come to see that students are always at a different place in their journey. For example, many students have questions and anxieties around what they need to do, and our counselor becomes a friend, helping them strategize around testing, applications, and so forth. Some students are high achievers. Some of you right now are listening, maybe a high achiever, gunning for the most selected universities, who are eager to learn from a counselor who is a mentor that helps them design a passion project and bring creativity to their essays for competitive summer programs at universities. The bottom line is, though, we meet each student with where they are in their journey and make sure they're getting the expert help to put their best foot forward. And you can read the numbers there, but I think kind of the big ones there. We've helped over 30,000 students one-to-one throughout this process. The number that I really love is the average financial aid package that our students are receiving, or $72,000 towards paying for college, which is awesome. We want to help students get into school, but also afford it. And 90% of our families that we work with are referred by other families. And we have an excellent rating on Trustpilot, which is always fun. So we can go to the next slide there, and just a couple of housekeeping. This will be recorded. So if you're on this, obviously you registered, you will get a recording of this in the next day or two. And if you're not on it right now, but you signed up at some point, you will also get it too. So if you have to jump early, we hope that you stay the whole time, but if you have to jump early, you will get this recording in the next day or two to the email that you used to register for this event. I will try my best to answer any questions you have. Maybe Hansel will answer some questions too in the chat. But if you have questions, I urge you to use the Q&A function at the bottom. So we have that nice little picture there. So Q&A good, raising the hand no good. So let's try to avoid that. I may put some things in the chat throughout, but that chat should be used by me to share info with all of you here. Any questions, please use the Q&A. And again, myself, maybe Hansel, will try to answer it in written form during the presentation. and or potentially Meredith will answer it live at the end. So that is all from me. I will be on a little bit later to share some other info with you all, but we'll pass it to the star of the show, Meredith Graham, who is a master Collegewise counselor, former admissions counselor at Cornell University, and she lives in the great state of Ohio and is going to lead us in this presentation tonight. Meredith, I'll pass it off to you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Joe. So I get to talk about one of my favorite super nerdy things tonight, which is STEM and college. I jokingly refer to myself as a STEM evangelist, complete with jazz hands. I do use them more often than not, especially when I'm presenting live. I promise it's way more fun when it's live than it is on a webinar. I'm very passionate about STEM and about students and finding their pathway into STEM and into college. So before I joined Collegewise, I've been with Collegewise since the summer of 2013. So I'm just heading towards my 11th anniversary with Collegewise. Before that, I spent about 15 years on the college side, doing a combination of admissions and advising and recruiting. And I've worked mostly with STEM students throughout my admissions and college counseling career. But even before that, I personally have a STEM background. My bachelor's degree is in chemistry, and I spent a couple of years working in research and development at Procter & Gamble. I worked in the far upstream research division down in Cincinnati. I don't know if we have any Ohio folks on here. I was working on biodegradable polymers, which back then nobody knew what those were. But like, if you ever seen like compostable plastic, that's what we were working on back when I first started out of college at Procter & Gamble. I realized pretty quickly that I like talking about STEM more than I like doing it. Like I really enjoy it, but I like talking about it more than doing it. So that's sort of what led me to doing what I do today, which is, talking about STEM, about college counseling, about college admissions. And one of the things I know from my experience is that there's a lot of confusion about the different areas of STEM, particularly when it comes to STEM in college. When you hear about it in high school, and then when you hear about sort of STEM careers after college, it all sort of blends together. And it's understandable that it does because there are a lot of different places and ways that STEM merges together when you're out in the real world. For example, when I worked at Cornell, I had a mom who called me one time and she said, "My daughter wants to cure cancer. What area of STEM should she major in to cure cancer?" And the answer is it depends. You can actually study a lot of different things within STEM and work on curing cancer. There's not just one path. It depends on what element of curing cancer you're interested in. And the student experience in college and in the admissions process, the journey into college, varies dramatically depending on what major you're interested in. And so I found over the years that it really makes a lot of sense to try to think through what area of STEM am I most interested in now, to try to help students figure out what their best fit pathway is at this point and then as they're heading into college. So that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight, is talking about what STEM means on the college level. And I'm going to be talking about some sort of representative examples, meaning like what is purely science, what is purely technology, what is purely engineering, what is purely mathematics. Again, it's pretty muddy in the middle. And once you get out into the real world, it's very muddy. And that's okay. You can use your experiences in a lot of different ways. But again, in terms of figuring out what area you want in college, it really helps to focus on it now. So we're going to talk about, what the differences are. We're going to talk about a little bit about what STEM looks like on the different levels in the different areas, and we're going to talk a little bit about how students and parents can work together to improve. And when we're talking about why does picking the right major matter in admissions, I'm sharing two different screen grabs and three URLs. So two of the URLs that are on this site are where I got this data. I pulled this data yesterday. The data on the left is from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And the one that's on the right is from the University of Washington at Seattle. And you can see admit rates of both of those universities. And when you look, and I know it's very tiny writing, sorry about that. You can't really read it very well. Joe, I don't know if you can grab those URLs and pop them in the chat or not. If you can, that's awesome. If not, feel free to like do a screen grab of them and look them up
I
later.
will work on it and try to get it in there for you.
Thank you very much. It may take you a while, but just because I know you're not in this exact slideshow. Um, but by looking at those, you can see that there's definitely a difference in admit rate for the different programs. And so picking the right college matters in terms of competitiveness for getting into college. Some colleges require you to pick your major as you're coming in, which is what we're showing here right now. Other colleges don't, even within STEM fields. And so knowing which ones require you to pick your major and what your major is helps you, or what you hope your major is going to be, really helps you enhance your chances and of getting into your top choice college, whatever that top choice college happens to be. Um, and and you can see, particularly the University of Washington. This is when Hansel and I were talking about this about a month or so ago. University of Washington at Seattle, their overall admit rate, it seems like it's pretty high. I mean, it's in like there's around 50% for in-state versus out-of-state. But what you can't read in those teeny tiny numbers is their engineering admit rate is about a 25%. And their out-of-state admit rate for computer science is 2%. 2%. So if you're not a Washington resident and you're applying for computer science at the University of Washington, it's a 2% admit rate. So understanding how these different majors and admit rates are at play when you're looking at college, as well as finding the best fit, makes a lot of sense. Now, we are talking broadly, or I am talking broadly about STEM tonight. We are doing an entire webinar just on computer science on May 8th. So we're really going to be doing a deeper dive just into computer science and sort of talking a little bit more about this specific to computer science when we get to that early May timeframe. I'm going to talk about it a little bit in the context of overall STEM tonight, but I want to make sure you know that that webinar is coming, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for that as well. So, okay, so now I'm going to get in. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I am putting that in the chat right now.
Thank you very much.
And I have those links, so I will share those in a second after this goes through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I should also say, so the top URL is for the University of Illinois stuff. The middle one is for the University of Washington. And then I also pulled the stuff from Cornell, which also you can sort of play around and look at the variable admit rates there. It doesn't lend itself to a screenshot, but it's interesting because you can actually go through and filter and you can see changes over time on that website. And after having spent 7 years there, I can tell you that, overall their admit rate in 2023 was just under 8%, but engineering admit rate was about 7%. Computer science lives in engineering at Cornell for the moment anyway. And then they have a program called Industrial and Labor Relations, which is not STEM related, and their admit rate was about 20% in 2023. So again, it's very variable depending on what area you're looking at. And sometimes once you're in college, it can be tough to switch between the different colleges. Sometimes it's straightforward, but sometimes it's not. So all right, so we're about to jump into STEM. And I know when Hansel and I were talking about this, you said, well, it sort of makes sense to speak through STEM, starting with science, technology, engineering, math in the order of this acronym. But I will tell you, again, I've been talking about this stuff for a long time. I have found that starting with math actually makes more sense because it's kind of a decision tree. So if you start with math and thinking about math, and I'm going to show you the decision tree at the end, by the way, so you'll get a chance to see it. But thinking about math first makes, in the grand scheme of things, it sets the stage to be able to talk about all the other areas. So that's where we're going to start. So math in mathematics is, most students know what they do for math in high school, but math is really, it's really much more about using, describing our natural and physical world and relating everything to pictures and to counting. That's really sort of a pure theoretical math is about. So you think about graphics, you think about, one of my longtime favorite examples is the movie Brave, which I know came out a few years ago now. But when you think about the difference in Pixar, there's so much math in Pixar, so much computing as well. But you have to have the math to describe how Merida's curly hair moves before you can actually write the software to describe it. So the math is sort of the foundation of that. And when you look at sort of earlier Pixar movies, you look at like The Little Mermaid, she was supposed to have curly hair in The Little Mermaid, but that was like early 90s. And then you look at, 20 some odd years later, Merida actually has curly hair that moves, kind of like real curly hair does. They actually had to write entirely new software for that because it's 1,500 separate simultaneous equations to describe how Merida's hair is moving. That's some serious math wattage. And again, that's sort of the higher level. When you're in college, math tends to be a more flexible major, relatively speaking, to the other STEM majors. So it tends to be easier to pair it with different areas in math. So one of the questions that I always ask my students is, are you interested in using math for the sake of math? Do you love proofs? Do you love sort of ideating on, the theory of calculus? Or are you somebody who wants to use math in service to other areas? And that's sort of where applied math comes in, and then also other fields and disciplines within math. And I've had discussions with other people about whether or not math technically belongs in STEM, because in some ways it's kind of its own thing. And in some ways it's more similar to other areas of STEM. But I think that it does belong because it is so related to all of the different areas. So math and statistics majors, and then, looking at financial math, data science. I was actually talking with one of my Collegewise students earlier tonight about actuarial science. One of the things that I did when I was at Purdue was I worked with actuarial science majors. And so it really, it's math and finance and business sort of all together and calculating risk. So it is very math intensive, but is using math in service to another area. Okay, so let's then move on from math then to science. So math is sort of about exploring the mathematical world, and then science is about exploring and building new knowledge about our natural and physical world. So answering the how and why questions. And sort of the classic example of science is around the discovery of penicillin. Um, you know, it was just a spot on a plate that somebody was trying to cultivate, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, why is that happening? So asking the question, nobody thought anything of it at the time. It wasn't until years later that was sort of this realization that, this is a thing. This actually could help save lives. So science, for pure science in college, one of the things you want to think about is you're going to be you're going to be doing a lot of lab classes. You're going to be asking questions, setting up experiments, and you're going to be running through them. And the goal, again, is to answer questions, how and why, building new knowledge. You're not necessarily, in pure STEM majors, you're not necessarily looking to apply the information you're getting there. So for biology, chemistry, physics majors, you are not necessarily looking to apply what you're learning in the classroom to particular problems. It's more like, oh, so that's why that happens. So if you're satisfied with that, great. If you decide that you're interested in applying that information to other areas, that's more where engineering comes in. So, math and science, sort of okay, we've got all this new information, and then engineering is, okay, so what? You've got this information, and now what do you do with these facts? What do you do with this? How do you use this in service to the greater good? And so that's really where the engineering comes in. It's using the existing math and science in order to, create solutions to problems that exist in the world. Um, and there some of the sort of the classic areas of engineering are mechanical and electrical and civil, but there's so many different fields. Engineering touches so many different areas of our lives. And I didn't grow up in an engineering family. I didn't grow up around engineers. So I didn't realize how much engineering touches until I really started, working at Procter and Gamble, because I worked in an engineering lab. I was working in, a polymer processing lab, which was an engineering lab. And so with engineering, again, you're looking at taking that information and creating, using the scientific information that other people have developed, and then creating something, turning it into something that's useful. So one of my favorite examples for engineering over the past probably close to a decade is there was a group in I'm going to get the country wrong. There's a group overseas. I'm not going to try and quote the country because I'm going to get it wrong. And they were doing Alzheimer's research. And so they were trying to discover, why does Alzheimer's happen? So this was a pure science lab. So they were looking at, what was happening in the brain. And they discovered in the brain of people who developed Alzheimer's that there was this protein in the brain that was accumulating. And so as a part of the science, so what is this protein? How does this happen? Where's it coming from? How does this protein behave? They isolated this protein and figured out all of its characteristics. Great. That's an important scientific discovery. And then they, sort of said, here's the science behind it. Here's this protein. So then there was this group who was trying to figure out how to create a rapid charger for a cell phone. And they discovered, as they were looking through, what can we use to create this rapid charger for the cell phone? They discovered this particular crystal that was made of this protein that was discovered in the Alzheimer's research. So this protein that came from this Alzheimer's research was used in developing a rapid charger for a cell phone. Science, you don't ever know where it's going to lead. You just discover the knowledge, and then hopefully, somebody finds it and it ends up being useful down the road. Engineering is sort of looking and saying, like, okay, here are these tools. How do I use them to make, to create a solution for whatever this problem is that I'm looking at? And one of the things that I also like to talk about with engineering, and I used to see this a lot at Cornell and also at Purdue, a lot of times students would come in and say, I'm good at math and science, I should be an engineer, right? Or people tell me I should be an engineer. And, sometimes, yeah. But one of the things that surprise people sometimes with engineering is that you don't necessarily need to love math and science. You need to have a certain proficiency with them, but you don't have to love them to be an engineer. You can just know how to use them safely and execute them, and know how to, to use those skills. And I have long talked about this as being similar to knife skills for chefs. Chefs don't, if you ask a chef why they became a chef, they rarely are going to talk about how they love chopping vegetables. But that is a necessary piece of being a chef. You have to know how to use your knife safely and to execute properly in order to achieve whatever outcome you're looking for. The same is true. Math and science are like an engineer's knife skills. You have to develop those skills. You have to know when and how to use them, but you don't necessarily have to love the math and science. You just have to be able to use them properly in order to be able to be successful. So I think one of the big challenges is trying to help people understand the difference between technology and engineering, particularly here in the US. Overseas, I think polytechnic universities, polytechnic programs have a little bit broader respect. Here in the US, it more often, if somebody says, they're getting a technology degree, there's sort of this misconception, even today, there's a misconception that a technology degree is sort of the equivalent of, sending your student to college or going to college in order to learn to repair copiers or install cable. And I'm very grateful to people who know how to do those things, because I'm not expert in those. But that's not really what technology is about when it comes to what you study in college. And again, remember, that's what we're trying to get at tonight, is understanding a little bit about the kinds of things you might be doing when you're in college, what things are going to look like in college. So engineering technology degrees, and a lot of times they're called engineering technology or just straight up technology, a lot of times they map to particular engineering areas. And so it's going to sound like I'm splitting some pretty fine hairs here as I talk about these. But for the most part, engineering is sort of about the concept. It's about the ideation. So you're using the science, you're creating some kind of a solution, and you're developing the idea, you're developing the prototype, you're sort of putting this idea together and sort of saying, like, oh, this can work, this can create a solution, this can be a good thing. And then by and large, technology is about executing that solution and making sure that it actually successfully gets out into the world. So I'll give you an example here. If you think about automobiles and concept cars, a concept car is largely an engineering outcome. Somebody says, hey, we've got this great idea for a new car. Here's what I think it should look like. Here's what I think the engine should be. Here's how it should behave. Fantastic. If the car company then decides that that concept car should become a production model, then they're going to get technologists more involved, and the engineers are still involved, and the technologists are involved a little bit as well. And then they're going to start to actually put it together and figure out how to actually make it happen, how to actually make that car get out into the real world. How do you actually produce it and get it onto lots? And then in future years, when there are year over year model year updates, Usually that's more technologists, engineering technologists that are involved in the year-over-year model updates because they're tweaking it, they're refining it. They're not necessarily creating an entirely new car. They're not necessarily coming up with an entirely new idea of what that car should look like. Now, what gets even muddier in here is that a lot of times technologists, when they graduate from college, their first job is called engineer. So it gets really tricky to sort of see and understand the difference. And I would imagine a lot of you are sitting there going, I still am not totally understanding. That's okay. Like I said, this is pretty muddy. One other really important thing to know about the difference between technology and engineering, the technology majors take a lot less theoretical math. So if you're a student who really likes to tinker with things, you like to sort of build, design, you like problem solving, you like doing the hands-on stuff, but you're more interested in doing the hands-on, sort of jumping in rather than doing theoretical calculations, you might be more interested in the technology. Um, one way I like to talk about this, when you think about your or your physics classes in high school, and also in college. If you're doing an algebra-based physics class, you can pretend that the earth is flat in an algebra-based physics class. But in a calculus-based class, you can't. You have to account for the curvature of the earth. Great. Technologists, a lot of times in college, they're going to take an algebra-based class because they need to get close enough to approximate, and then they'll jump right into sort of a build and break cycle. So engineers and technologists use what's called the engineering design process. So they'll build something, they'll test it, they'll tweak it, they'll break it, and then they'll come back and they'll build it again. They'll do iterative design and improve it. Technologists and engineers both do that. Technologists are going to do some like back of the envelope calculations and then jump in to do whatever design. And then the engineering folks are more going to do more theoretical calculations. We used to see that at Purdue with like a capstone class that the students would do in mechanical engineering and in mechanical engineering technology. They would usually have exactly the same assignment between those two majors. But in the technology program, the students would start. So, for example, it would be a robot that had to execute a particular task and it needed to use particular materials and hit a particular cost and have a particular success rate. So they would give them both, both of the classes would have exactly the same assignment. And the technology students in a 16-week semester, the technology students would jump into building the robot at like week 4, usually week 3 to 4. They'd do some, again, quick calculations, some quick design, and then they'd get into building and breaking and building and breaking. And then the engineers would usually do more calculations and more sort of concept design, more computer-based design until probably closer to like week 10. And then they would actually start to prototype and actually make them. So again, it's very similar, but it's about sort of how are you approaching it? Which lens are you approaching it? It's not that one is necessarily better than the other. It's really about which is going to be a better fit for you. And so again, if you were somebody who likes to get execute the technology, to refine the engineering, refine the concepts, and make sure that the quality is exactly where you want it to be and continue to sort of refine and improve it, then technology may be more along the lines of what you're interested in, especially if you don't love the theoretical math all that much. So I promised that I was going to give you the decision tree here. So this, and you heard me sort of reference some of this along the way. But this is really sort of the guiding set of questions that you can use. And I promise I'm going to get to computer science because you notice we haven't really talked about this yet. I promise you I'm going to get there. These are kind of the guiding questions you can use to help you figure out which area of these you're interested in. For math, I know I referenced at the start, math majors tend to be a little bit more flexible in terms of the coursework. So you tend to have the math content, and then you tend to have a little bit more flexibility so that you can pair the math with something else. One of my students at Purdue paired her math and statistics degree. She paired that major with a major in religious studies as well, because she had a real interest in understanding why young people were leaving the church. And so she used her math knowledge to help design surveys and work with the diocese in her hometown to better understand why there weren't more young people who were engaged in the church. And she was able to do that easily and still graduate in 4 years because the math offered enough flexibility for her to be able to do that. So she could use the math She ultimately was using the math in service to something else. She loved the theory, but she was ultimately using it in service to something else. Science, again, how and why does this work? Science majors are going to take also a lot of high level math. They're going to typically you're going to take, whatever your science area is. And then you're typically also going to be taking a lot of sort of the paired sciences. So if you're taking chemistry, you're going to take a lot of physics. If you're doing biology, you're going to do a lot of chemistry. If you're doing physics, you're going to do a lot of both of them, as well as the high level math as well. And a lot of lab time as well. I spent a lot of time in the lab when I was an undergrad because that's what you're doing. That's how you're practicing. That's how you're getting that experience and you're building that new knowledge. Um, a lot of times with math and science, also, you're also going to be taking more of a liberal arts style curriculum, which I know is kind of a scary thing. So you're probably going to have a lot more sort of humanities kinds of classes. Sometimes you're going to have some foreign language classes that are required. I know sometimes students aren't real excited about that. Some students love that possibility. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, then you might be looking more at the math or the science kind of an area. Engineering, then, how do you use the knowledge that's existing in order to create solutions to problems? You're going to be taking, again, a lot of high level math. You're going to be taking a fair amount of physics, calculus based physics. You're going to be taking chemistry. If you're in more of sort of a life science engineering, so biomedical engineering, you'll end up taking a lot of biology. Across the board in the engineering, you will be taking computer science as well, because you pretty much can't do any of this stuff at this point without computing. And then the technology, how do you use this concept to actually produce something? Again, it is the lightest of the math. You'll still take math, but you're going to be taking more sort of applied math, so applied calculus as opposed to theoretical calculus, more the applied physics as opposed to the theoretical physics. So if, again, if you love the idea of being an engineer, but you just think you can't really stomach doing calculus 1, 2, 3, linear algebra, and differential equations, maybe look at the technology programs because that might still get you what you want out of that. So, and again, each of these has their own lens when you're studying them and their own lens to coming at the solutions to whatever it is that they're looking at, whatever problems they're looking at. All right. So, where does computer science fit in all of this? Notice I haven't referenced it really at all. Computer science is wonderful and it's a little tricky because it is its own thing, it's its own entity, and it sort of, in some ways, defies the decision tree that the other STEM majors use. Computer science can be used in service to other areas, and in fact, often is, I would say nearly always is. There are, theoretical computer science as, areas as well, but nearly always computer science is going to be used in service to some other area. It's just sort of a question of what that is. The big question also around computing is, are you more interested in the software side of things or in the hardware side of things? Now, one of the things that gets really confusing about this and colleges is that colleges don't treat computer science the same way. So there are some colleges where you will find computer science living purely in an engineering program. There are other places where you will find computer science living purely in like a college of arts and sciences. There are other places where you will find it living in both of those. There are other places where you will find it living in its own little fiefdom. So you really need to sort of pay attention to how the university is structured. And when it comes to computer science, read the curriculum. There were a number of students that I had at Purdue who came in who wanted computer science. They wanted the software side of things, but they hadn't read the curriculum when they were applying because, why would you think to do that? Well, I'm telling you right now, you need to do that because that would have helped them see that, oh, they actually wanted the hardware side of things. They'd applied to the wrong program. So again, you want to pay attention to that because sometimes it can be difficult to switch between the programs. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. Um, so again, May 8th, we're talking all about computer science, really just sort of getting into those nuances on May 8th. So if you really want a super duper deep dive in computer science, come back for that webinar as well. And you'll be able to hear us really get super nerdy about this. One of the other pieces that comes along with computer science um, is, and it's not just computer science, this is true for math and for science majors typically as well, is do you want to do a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science? And so the information that's on the screen here is from the University of Colorado at Boulder, taken directly from their website and their course catalog, talking about the difference between the Bachelor of Arts and the Bachelor of Science in computer science. And I liked this description because I think it's um, a pretty good representation of what the difference is for lots of different colleges. So if you're looking at a place that says, well, I have a Bachelor of Arts versus a Bachelor of Science. So University of Virginia, for example, has one in each of the areas. Cornell has one in each of the areas. So they've got one in their College of Arts and Sciences. They've got one in their College of Engineering, and one's a Bachelor of Arts, one's a Bachelor of Science. Generally speaking, if you're looking at computer science, you're going to be looking at the core courses are going to be the same, no matter which one you're doing. But the question is, do you want to study it from like an engineering lens? Do you want to take a lot more in-depth, high-level math? Do you want to really take a lot of physics, a lot of science, especially if you're looking at like mathematical modeling of scientific phenomenon? You might be more interested in going that route. Or are you more interested in your other classes being more sort of classic liberal arts kinds of classes? If you're interested in something like natural language processing or language acquisition, you might potentially be more interested in a Bachelor of Arts, because a lot of times a Bachelor of Arts in computer science is easier to get foreign language classes and linguistics classes. So if that's an area of interest for you, it is worth considering it. One of the important take homes that's on this slide, and this is true across most universities, whether you're doing a Bachelor of Arts in computer science or a Bachelor of Science in computer science, the hiring prospects and starting salaries are very, very similar. So you are not dooming yourself to irrelevance if you're doing a Bachelor of Arts in computer science. There are times where that is truly the better route for you. And in fact, I worked with a transfer student 2 years ago. This was a student, he started at the University of Washington in computer science, was a Washington resident, and was super excited about it, and got part of the way through his first year and realized it wasn't going to get him what he wanted, because he wanted to do machine learning and was looking at language processing. That was his area of interest. And he didn't really realize it when he was applying to college, but sort of realized it as he was starting. And he felt like the curriculum at the University of Washington was not going to allow him to take the courses that he wanted in order to study computing the way he wanted to. For him, it just wasn't working. It felt too confining. He couldn't get the language classes he wanted. So we worked together to help him figure out what transfer options made sense for him. And he looked at a bunch of places, and ultimately he was going to apply to both Cornell and the University of Pennsylvania to transfer, and ultimately decided not to apply to the University of Pennsylvania because computer science only was a Bachelor of Science. And when he looked at the curriculum, it was going to be exactly the same thing he'd run into, or he feared it would be. And at Cornell, he had the option of applying to arts and sciences, and he could come in there and take the foreign language classes. And so he applied as a transfer student to Cornell, and he ended up putting together a fantastic application, and he'll be graduating next year from computer science at Cornell, because it was a better fit for him and what he was interested in doing, the Bachelor of Arts there in computer science. So there again can be compelling reasons to study Bachelor of Arts in computer science, depending on what your areas of interest are. And by the way, this Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science thing, I kind of referenced it, but this is true for chemistry, for biology, for math. Depending on the college, sometimes you might have the option of doing either or. Not everywhere, but it's worth, again, looking at look at the curriculum, figure out what the differences are going to be. All right, a little bit about high school academic prep. What should you be taking in high school to keep the STEM doors open for yourself? As much as possible, wherever you are, take as much math as you can in the calculus stream. Now, if you're at a high school that does not offer calculus, do the best you can to take as much as you can, and then look around online for other options. Schoolhouse.world, for example, Caltech this past year said, hey, the calculus offerings that they have through Schoolhouse.world actually meet the standards that we need for students to be admitted. So if your high school doesn't have calculus, definitely take a look at Caltech's website and dig into what they have to offer there in terms of what they recommend for students. That's a great quick reference place for it, even if you're not going to ultimately apply to Caltech. They've got great information there. If you've maxed out on your calculus, keep looking. There are other options that are out there, Johns Hopkins, some of the online high schools as well, to keep sticking with the calculus stream as long as you can. Make sure you take at least 3 years of science. Again, if you're applying for STEM majors, try to max out on the sciences that are available that you take at your high school, whatever's available to you. Make sure you dig in as much as you can to take as many as you can, and then don't neglect your other coursework. While most of the colleges are really going to be focusing on more what you've done with the STEM, making sure that you can write and can communicate your ideas is really important. Nothing kills a great idea faster than not being able to communicate it. And that is true for STEM folks as well as folks outside of STEM as well. And again, foreign language, make sure you take that. The world is a very intercultural place at this point. So having some understanding um, of different languages and different cultures will stand you in good stead no matter what. And I should also say that this is sort of a standard or I don't want to say minimum high school prep. Your high school may have additional requirements or different requirements. This is going to be pretty typical for a typical college prep. If you are looking at a highly selective college, one of the big name fancy pants places, you want to make sure that you're doing more than what's listed on here. So 4 years plus of math, make sure you do all 4 years of science, etc. And by the way, if you are at your high school and you have the option of doing AP Calculus or AP Stat in your senior year, if you think you want to be a STEM major, calculus, do the calculus. Trust me on that, just do the calculus. All right, so I'm going to talk real briefly about some of the softer skills that you might need. This always takes students by surprise. And when I do this presentation in person, I can usually tell who in the room is a STEM professional by the looks on your faces when you read this list, particularly that bottom bullet point. So the reason I talk about these is because you have to have great technical skills in order to be successful in college in STEM, as well as in a STEM career later on. But STEM in college is tough. It doesn't matter which of the areas you pick. It's tough. You are going to be challenged and work hard in ways that you never thought that you would. And you can be successful in it. You just have to make sure that you have all of the skills in place, and particularly the persistence and the patience. I think a lot of times those are areas that students really don't think about needing. But when you think about tricky math proof that you've been working on, or a tricky bit of coding that you're trying to debug, or some other, elements, a biology, you're trying to sort of figure out what a pathway is, a biochemical reaction, whatever it is. It's tough sometimes to sort of understand what those pieces are. Sometimes, like setting it down and walking away and coming back is really important. You have to keep trying. And students can be really great at this in areas other than homework, but especially in high school, you're really sort of used to, there's an answer already. And so you just have to, come up with the right way and get to the correct answer. Well, remember, in real world STEM, whether you're in the sciences or math, or whether you're in engineering or technology, you're going where nobody's gone before. You are creating new knowledge. You are building things that never existed. There is no roadmap. There are going to be facts, there are going to be details, but you have to be creative. You have to be persistent. You have to be willing to keep trying, because you can have a great idea and maybe not get it quite right that first time, or that fifth time, or that 10th time, or that 100th time. But the idea is still good. You just have to keep working at it, trying to keep, being patient and persistent, and being creative, trying to come up with different perspectives and different approaches. The teamwork, I got to put that on here. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about STEM and in like STEM careers is that they are solitary. They are not. They are team endeavors. They're interdependent in a lot of ways. The piece that you work on, somebody else is relying on it, and you're waiting on somebody else to provide something so that you can work on that piece and pick that up and run with it. And so practicing that skill in high school is really important. And I know team projects are the bane of most high school students' existence. I get that. But, really trying to work hard on showing up for your team, even in class projects, even when you have the A, you don't have to worry about it, even when it's a class you don't care about, because somebody else is counting on you. So really sort of practicing that is important. And that tolerance for ambiguity piece down there, that's the one that really a lot of STEM professionals sort of say, wait a minute, why do we have this up here? Because both accuracy and precision are very important in STEM. However, it's important to remember that you can come at problems from different perspectives. So there's not just one way to solve a problem. I used to see this with my students at Purdue. They would come in and say, well, my TA doesn't know what they're doing. I'd say, what do you mean? Talk to me about this. Well, my professor started to work this problem on the board and they started it this one way and I couldn't figure it out. So I went to my TA for help and my TA did it a completely different way. Clearly my TA doesn't know what they're doing. Well, no, that's not true. It just means that they're coming at it from a different perspective. They're probably coming at the same solution, but they're just coming at it from different ways. So students who can sort of understand that there are different ways of approaching the problem and still getting to the right solution or a great solution are going to fare better than students who don't have these sort of soft skills in development. So keep these in mind, keep working on these through your extracurriculars, all of your different extracurriculars, the STEM ones and the non-STEM ones. And so here are some of the different kinds of experiential prep you can get that are STEM related. You can try out different STEM areas outside of class, science Olympiad, biology Olympiad, math Olympiad, even something like, academic decathlon, academic challenge. Those are areas where you're still going to learn a lot of STEM or potentially could learn a lot of STEM. Um, getting your hands dirty, trying different areas, things like, our friends at the coder school, that is a great opportunity, a great activity to get involved with and to really sort of try some different things out. There are some different free and low cost online opportunities. Coursera can be a really good option. Kaggle competitions, I have a couple of students who have started to get involved in those. And those are really, really fascinating kinds of experiences for students. Citizen science is one that a lot of people maybe haven't even heard of. I will say, as we're recording this, the solar eclipse is about 2 weeks away. NASA is looking for a lot of people to do a lot of things around the eclipse. So if you're interested, you can just Google NASA citizen science and it'll pop up a whole list of projects. And so if that intrigues you, you can get involved in those and sort of get involved in participating in science from wherever you are, and just sort of experiencing that and being a part of it. There are other citizen science projects as well, but just sort of given the timing of this right now, NASA citizen science, look it up. You'll be glad you did, and get involved with it if that's something that intrigues you. You never know what you're going to learn or what kinds of connections you're going to make through that kind of experience. And then passion projects, choosing something that you want to do on your own and working on that. I've had students design card catalogs for libraries, like electronic card catalogs for libraries. I've had students who have modified newsletters for their churches. I've had students, in other areas of STEM. I had a student who thought she wanted to study agriculture, and so she built like an apartment, like a patio garden for herself. And when she got to the end of the summer, and I said, "What did you think?" She said, "I hated it." And I was like, "Great." But you know what? It was a great story for her application. Even though she didn't want to stick with it, it was a great story for her application. She discovered that she loved cooking as a result of that. She ultimately ended up studying architecture, which I know doesn't seem to make sense, but she was really fascinating and had some really fantastic, passionate experiences while she was in high school because she really would just jump in and try something new. Librarians are an unsung resource. I'm just going to say, really, really, really incredible. Make sure you talk to your librarians, especially youth librarians. They're really potentially very magical people, and can help you get started in a lot of different directions. The number of students that I've had who have used their local librarians to create some pretty amazing things is really, really awesome. So, and if you've got a local Fab Lab or a makerspace, some of you may be lucky enough to have a makerspace at your high school. If you do, yay. You can also sort of look around and see if you've got, again, your local library. Some libraries have things you can check out, or, Fab Lab like makerspaces that you can use even at the library. Again, not everybody has that, but if that's something you have access to, it's definitely worth looking at. And with that, that was a whole lot of me talking very quickly. And I am going to pass it back to Joe here for just a second.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you. And please start dropping your questions in the Q&A because we will have about 10 minutes to answer them. So anything that you want to know, we'll have Meredith answer. And really amazing stuff. I really appreciate that. I learned a lot. I've been doing this for 15 years. So I hope that everyone here also learned. Hey, if you're interested at all of working with college advisors, someone like Meredith, go ahead and just say yes that you like a complimentary call for program advisor. I feel like a salesman here, but there's no strings attached at all. If you say yes there, it just means in the next day or two, a program advisor, someone that knows all of our programs, the structure, the pricing, the counselors available will reach out, get to know what you're looking for, and see if it's would be a good match for you. To work with Collegewise and try to get that started. And usually like a 30 to 45-minute call. And again, if you don't want to move forward, that's totally fine. But just go ahead and click yes there. And we want the general questions now. I think I just see one there now. Put them in the chat or the Q&A. We'll get to them in 1 second. Any general questions, but we know that there may be a lot of personalized advice you're looking for. Every family situation is unique, and we know this is a challenging time. Being in this field the last couple of years, the SAT changes going digital, the Supreme Court ruling last summer, the continued drop in emissions rate, and more. It's really hard to know what to do. So we're here to help. Regardless if your child is in 8th grade or 11th, starting senior year soon, we can help your child plan out their goals and reach them. And for the parents on this call right now, we want you to focus on being a parent and enjoy the time left with your child in the home, as opposed to stressing out about deadlines and what AP courses they should take or what extracurriculars they should engage in. So polls there, and if you are, we're actually getting a lot of yeses here, so spots can fill up quick. So I'm going to put in another in the chat, just like a meeting link if you want to go to that and connect with a program advisor. Meredith, do you want to read off any of the questions that you feel okay answering?
Well, let me see. So one of the folks asked, are you going to get a copy of the deck? Absolutely, you will. Or sorry, no, you're going to get the recording. So in terms of like who we support, we've got some different questions about the programs. We work with students all over the world. I work with students across 15 or 16 hours of time zone, depending on the time of year. And I know that's true with our other counselors as well. We have students working with, students in every state of the US. And we do have different people who specialize in different states as well. And then we've got some other
Yeah.
questions in here. Sorry,
All
that's
right,
in the queue.
yeah, I'm back here. Yeah, we have two two questions in the Q&A, two in the chat. So
Yeah, sorry, I was
let's
looking at the
start.
Q&A and I was like,
Yeah, let
wait.
me. So there's a question about AP Computer Science A and AP Computer Science principles.
Okay.
If seeking a computer science major direction, what do you recommend taking? Are taking AP Calc BC, AP Stats, and other AP Advanced Math courses should those be prioritized? So a lot there. I imagine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll let you take it away.
Yeah. So that's one where I'm going to use the most hated response that college admissions folks and college counselors ever give, which is it depends. And I know people hate that. The fact is that's true. And when I say it depends, it's partly because like it depends on your student, it depends on what your school offers, it depends on the opportunities, it depends on what they're doing outside of school. I've had some students who have done computer science A and then have doubled back and done computer science principles because they didn't have any other options at their school. I've had other students who have done computer science principles and then have done A. I've had other students who have done higher level math. So it really depends on so many different factors. I would say, generally speaking, for a student who's interested in computer science, trying to make sure that you do some sort of programming class, I would say the A, because that's a little bit more sort of the programming as opposed to, sort of the computing concepts. I would say if you can do the computer science A, if your school offers it, and then trying to stick with the calculus stream over the AP stats is probably going to stand someone in better stead, generally speaking. But again, general advice is does not necessarily take into account your student's specific situation and your school's specific options. Did I
Great.
did I answer that question?
I think so.
Okay.
Let me answer a couple of really good questions here. I like this one. Do we need to be worried that computer science as a major is oversaturated at this point?
Mm. Do we need to be worried about that? I would say yes and no. And it's yes in the sense that So, and I'm going to get real philosophical here for a few minutes. So I have been, and I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. Back when I was recruiting at Purdue, which was 20 some odd years ago, that was on the heels of the .com bust. And I can remember parents saying to me in information sessions, why would I bother encouraging my student to major in computer science? Because there are no jobs available. Because it was the .com bust, and hiring had dried up by and large. And so they were saying there's no point. So I'm starting to see that there could be an element of boom and bust to like some of the computer science industry. Now, does that mean that there aren't jobs out there? No, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't jobs out there. But I do think that what students need to think about and what families need to think about is other ways to approach computer science in terms of not just applying to the same 15 schools over and over again, not just applying to straight up coding. There was a really interesting, and like I said, I'm going to get super nerdy, going to get real philosophical here. There was a real interesting piece in The Atlantic this week, and I know I sent it to Hansel, and we may talk about it. Actually, I'll end up bringing it up on the webinar on May 8th as well. That really sort of talked about the importance of balancing computer science, so the actual study of the field of computer science with other areas, so ethics, with language, with sort of the humanities side of things, and how increasingly important that's going to be. And that is something that's where people can come at that a little bit differently. You don't necessarily just have to apply to Carnegie Mellon for computer science, or just to the University of Washington for computer science, or to Stanford for computer science. You can come at it in a lot of different directions, and that includes regional public universities. That actually includes liberal arts colleges. Interestingly enough, Colby College, which is a little liberal arts college in Maine, has the first undergraduate center for AI in the nation at a liberal arts college. Colby College. Fascinating. Nobody would think of that except Colby. So like, I think that a lot of times liberal arts colleges, people think, oh, well, I can't possibly go there and study computer science. Not true. You can. So there are other pathways. It's not just the same 15 places that everybody's applying to over and over and over again. And actually, I don't think Joe knows this. I actually just had a panel discussion on this. I proposed and was accepted at our national conference for September on this exact topic. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time around this topic over the next few months. Really fascinating topic. So that's a great question.
I do know, and I'll be there to support you.
Yes. Hey. Woohoo.
Um, and the question on the Q&A, I know I think you answered it, but just to double down on that, if you are looking like specifically to apply to UCs, yes, we have a bunch of counselors that have extensive knowledge on the UC system. Many of our counselors who live in California, so that's one of those things where you would get matched up most likely with a counselor that has that experience, if that's
Yeah,
your main concern there.
absolutely.
Let's see. We have time for two more questions. My oh, missed this one before. For interest in STEM, especially microbiology and
Mhm.
genetics, is taking AP Calc BC or AP Stat recommended?
What was I saying before? It depends. Woohoo. Yeah, again, you're gonna love that. So students, and again, this is one where this is like super duper nuanced. Like if I'm working with your student, I'm going to spend a lot of time sort of teasing this out and trying to figure out what's the better pathway. Broadly speaking, in college, biology majors are going to have to do some calculus, and are going to have to do statistics usually. And biology majors within the sciences tend to have or can have lighter math options. Sometimes they can get away with an applied calculus class as opposed to a theoretical calculus class like the engineers take. One of the things that I think is interesting about biology is a lot of the future of biology, though, is at the intersection of computing. And so having that mathematical wattage, if a student has the chops to do the BC calculus, I think it's worth considering. The stats isn't a bad option for somebody who knows that they're going to major in biology. But again, I think if they have the chops to do the calculus, I think it's worth considering that as well. So
Great. And last question. Um, actually, maybe two more, and I think it's totally obviously okay if the answer is no because you're on the spot here. But do you
yeah.
have any website suggestions for finding engineering or computer science related internships or best ways to explore different areas of engineering and computer science before picking the major in college, besides
Uh,
working with a college-wise counselor?
Besides that, yeah. So that's actually one of the slides I took out from tonight, actually. Um, so yeah, so there are a lot of different ones that are out there. In order to explore, one of my, I would start with like ASEE, which is American Society for Engineering Education, which I know sounds super dry and boring. Um, but like take a look there and sort of see like what different programs and options they have listed there in terms of exploring different majors. That's not necessarily going to be a place to get internships or research opportunities or hands-on like engineering camps. There are programs for that, but I can't like those URLs. I can't really rattle off the top of my head, unfortunately. We do have some of those available in one of the guides that we wrote a few years ago, but yeah. I'll try and remember to throw that slide in on the 8th. How's that for an
Yeah,
answer?
and Lisa, if you're still on here, you can email me, Joe K at collegewise.com, and just ask that question, and I'll make sure to follow up with Meredith to get you that information. So
Yeah,
Joe K at collegewise.com.
yeah.
And we are at time. We want to respect all of your time and our great presenter, Meredith. So thank you, Meredith, for that.
Thank
Amazing.
you very much.
Remember the next webinar specifically on computer science, May 8th, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Be on the lookout for that. And again, this recording will be sent to you in the next day or two. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for coming, everyone.